All right. Hopefully attempt number 2 works a little better. Uh, no title this time. Just right to the live. See what happens. Hello, everyone. Where are you tuning in from? Let's see. Okay, I just accepted Amanda's request twice. I'm accepting again.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Turn down video.
Okay. So I still can't see you, but we're just gonna have to roll with
Yeah,
it.
we're gonna have to roll with it. They're messing with us for sure because I think people can see both of us.
Yeah.
Hey, Austin, it's been a while since I've seen you in here. It's been a while since I've done a live. All right, everyone, can you guys see the both of us? That I'm just curious about that. And I think sometimes when this has happened to me before, once this live is saved, then both are on the screen too. Okay,
Okay.
everyone can see both of us, so we're just gonna, it's like a phone call. Okay.
Okay. Maybe I can
Okay,
pull it
loud
up
and
on my
clear.
computer so I can see you.
Okay, everyone can see us. They can hear us. Okay, this is just what we're gonna have to work with.
All
All
right.
right. There is a lot of fear right now. I know because it's being pumped into my messages, my inbox, getting tons of questions around this particular topic. And I don't know even if I can say the word, but I'm going to because how can you talk about measles without saying it? And there's this, this next wave of the next thing, the next scary thing that we have to, protect ourselves from and outbreaks, this and that. So I've been talking about it on my Instagram, but I thought, what better way than bring on one of my favorite experts in this topic that can help dismantle. I shouldn't say this topic. I mean, you're just an expert in so many things, but I know you have vast amount of knowledge in this area as well. Especially for me, I find when we can remove the fear of the contagion, then that's where all the power lies. People get mad at me for talking about it and saying, it's just another way to add division and this and that. But I think it's one of the most important topics to discuss because once we actually can own this power and this knowledge, all the fear, any kind of propaganda they throw at us is gone. So I think it's incredibly important. So Amanda, I'm gonna put the floor over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Kristen. Yeah, I mean, it's totally a battle of propaganda the amount of propaganda that's being thrown at us is monumental. Ultimately, what people have to understand is like some of the history of how we even got to here, how the germ theory formed. I have a lot of that information on my platform on yummy.doctor. I have an entire membership that, I'm there to teach people how to doctor themselves because ultimately, we need like certain help when we're going through something. But if we actually understand our bodies, and especially when it comes to children, there's a lot of fear, right? Like we're both parents. We've seen our children suffer through, fevers and expressions and things. But when you understand what's really going on with the body, that a lot of the fear lifts, and then you can properly treat what's happening. And when you have like the false ideology and the false belief around the germ theory and that it's a contagion, that it's a virus, all of these false stories, then you can go, oh, I see what's happening. Like, for example, right now it's the spring. So what I teach is every time the spring comes or the autumn comes, when we have a change of seasons, the body naturally goes through a purging, cleansing cycle. We've lost connection to all sorts of cycles in our lives. Okay. We don't connect with nature. We don't see how these cycles affect us directly. And when it comes to a change of seasons, the body's going to purge. And when you have an onslaught of various poisons, essentially, from the shots, from the spraying, from the water and food, from stress, right? These things accumulate inside of the bodies. Our bodies, our children's bodies, even, look at like cord blood. Look at
Yeah.
the amount of toxins they find in forever chemicals and xenoestrogens they find in the umbilical cord. Just that alone, our children are coming in hot, okay, already. And then we're adding insult to injury with food dyes and sugars and all this other stuff. So there's all this inflammation going on in the body. Then you add stress. Now you add soils that are depleted and nutrient deficiencies. What are you going to get? You're going to get expressions that produce symptoms. regularly or normally, your body would just express things properly through the liver system, okay? And you wouldn't really see symptoms. Because why doesn't everybody get everything, right? It's because it's your terrain that's able to keep up on top of it or not. So when there's a trigger, you're going to get what looks epidemiologically like a contagion. But that's not science, because you can't actually look at epidemiological statistics and say and claim that it's caused by a virus or a bacteria or any of those things. You actually have to do proper rigorous science to extrapolate and figure out what it was. For example, if someone goes to a wedding and everyone eats the cream dip, and a huge percentage of those people become sick, you could probably piece it together that was the cream dip. But if you just looked at the epidemiology, you could say they all caught a virus at the location. You know what I mean? But that's what's being done in the pseudoscience called virology. And if you actually break it down and understand how virology works, which I'll go through in a minute, you can see the scam and how they've hoodwinked us into all kinds of stories about what really makes us sick. And they steer us away from the truth of our bodies. So when it comes to measles, it's an expression that's pushed out through the skin. The proteins have gotten inflamed. There are damaged proteins that must come out of the body. They're going through a cleansing process. And if there is not enough of certain vitamins or minerals or inputs, then it's done through the skin. The skin is an elimination route. The lungs are an elimination route. Mucus is an elimination route. Stool, through the bowels, even through the urine, is an elimination route. This is where how the body tries to rebalance and get back to homeostasis. And what we know of measles specifically is that the body is not coping with the burden. It's triggered into a release, and there's not enough vitamin A. Okay, that's one of the big aspects that's in deficiency. And you can look up papers. I have papers that talk about measles and vitamin A deficiency. It's not even like voodoo, like it's not even like questionable. It's in the literatures. You can go look it up. And the other thing that's important about dosing with vitamin A is that it needs zinc to process, and also vitamin D levels should be looked at. And you often will see this after a long winter where the kids are not getting a lot of fat soluble vitamins, and they're going through this type of expression. So right there, a treatment protocol is vitamin A, vitamin D, which always should be taken with K2 so it's processed properly. You can get that from animal fats, animal liver, ghee, butter, you can get it from eggs. Like, you can work it into the diet of the child, of course, but as you're treating it, you have to go pretty high with the vitamin A for 2 days. So in like, say, a toddler, you would do 200,000 international units of vitamin A with zinc to help it process. And in an infant, you would do 100,000 international units of vitamin A. And that's only for 2 days. You only treat for 2 days. So as you start to see symptoms going on, so that's like a treatment protocol in the moment. But then prevention is making sure they're getting this in their diet. And like you mentioned in the last kind of little mini live we went, fermented cod liver oil is one of the best ways. I have a cod liver oil on my yumnaturals.store that I like from Carlson. That's a little more affordable, so it depends on your price point and stuff. But that's like two teaspoons of that a day in a situation where you're like having an expression, and then to take 1 teaspoon a day of prevention. Okay, so it's a real simple fix. The body is expressing toxins. It doesn't have the right nutrition to get it done properly through the liver. It's pushing out through the skin. You're going to see symptoms. You're going to see fever. You might have malaise. You might have bowel issues and that sort of stuff. It's going to be a little bit different for each different child, but ultimately, that's their way of correcting it. Like that, those symptoms are not bad. And that's what happens with the germ theory ideology and the conventional medical system that so well, that we both know so well, right? That symptoms are bad, and so we have to stop the symptom. And so take the paracetamol, or, take the injection or something and stop it. And so like the MMR is one of the most deadly shots out there and causes a lot of autism. And why it does is because you have 3, it's a triple hit. It's measles, mumps, rubella. It's a triple hit, right? And what they do with the shots, and I'll explain it as we go through the pseudoscience of virology a little more, is that it actually breaks the expression mechanism. So what they're doing with the shots is saying no to the body. Do not express this way. Do not use this route of elimination. Do not heal through the skin. Do not do that. And so now the body's like, well, okay, we're going to either try to and override your poison. And you'll see this, like, kids will get a shot, the MMR, and then they'll get a measles-like rash afterward. See this all the time. Well, that's the mechanism going, no way, Jose, like you just triggered us. Now we're going to start the mechanism. Obviously, something has triggered the mechanism, so it starts to express through the mechanism. So understanding that we have these mechanisms that are there to help the body purge, and understand that vaccine's ultimate goal and most of conventional medicine's goal is to suppress that mechanism. To don't do that because the symptoms are bad. We don't like those symptoms, and then they declare a win. They're like, we did it. We made it go away. But what did they trade off? Mental health, creates cancer, heart disease, lowered IQ, fertility issues, chronic allergies. The list goes on of what they create instead of actually supporting the body through its cleansing and purging process. Okay, and I totally understand with parents, they see it, they think it's scary because of all the propaganda, but we have to overcome that now and get to the root cause that the child needs support in the form of nutrition. It needs to be allowed to go through the process. I understand there can be, really bad cases of like where you have encephalitis and that kind of thing involved. I totally get that. You want to protect the brain. There's things that you can do to support that, even things like dimethyl sulfoxide, DMSO, which I teach. I have a book about it. I have all kinds of blends that I make and remedies that I make with it. There are other ways that you can overcome a stuck case like that or a difficult case like that. So let's go into the fact that there's no viruses at all. And let me talk. Do you have any questions before I go into that, or anything that was unclear? Or
anything that we're watching in the comments come up. I think the most recent one we're about to dive into is explaining about like the virus and contagion. That's what you're about to jump into.
Yeah.
There was a comment about vitamin A. How someone was saying, they don't recommend it because body can't absorb it. There's lots of sources. That's why I like real food, vitamin A. Amanda has a great source in her company that you can get. But that's why I like it in cod liver oil. It's part of a well-rounded, nutrient base. And liver is so high in vitamin A. And so just eating like liver capsules, or, if you can cook real liver, beef liver, a good source, is an excellent way of getting that as well. And you don't need a lot. You do not need a lot of beef liver. It's potent in vitamin A, but that's why it's good to get the whole source. And I think one of the important things too is we really need to normalize the symptoms. I've had so many questions and things pop into my inbox about rashes, blisters, things, and they just want it to go away immediately instead of honoring the healing that the body is doing. And it's messy, it's ugly, it's uncomfortable. There's the discomfort. So you never want to stop the symptom. And there's this, I think, false belief when there's a fever, okay, Tylenol, it made the fever go away, so it worked. Oh, they're experiencing, a rash, gave antibiotics, so the rash went away. But what we're seeing is it's stopping the healing. So it's not that the body needed the Tylenol, needed the antibiotics. Maybe in some cases, yes, but I just see this instantaneous jump to grabbing these things, right? And so it looks like the antibiotics healed this rash or the symptoms or whatever it might be, but it's actually stopping the body from healing. And then so you'll see it reoccur because the body's not going through the whole process. And that's why, the fever comes back. That's why the sickness lingers. That's why you'll see the rash come back, because we're interfering with what the body's supposed to be doing and how it heals. So I think we really need to start normalizing the symptoms, the healing, the messiness of it, the ugliness of it, the discomfort, and knowing that the body's doing exactly what it needs to do to get us through this.
Yeah.
And of course, I realized I need to start adding disclaimers to my videos. In acute emergency situations, thank goodness that's why there's the medical system, but we do need to start allowing the body to heal first before we just immediately resort to these things. So I just wanted to throw that in as we continue.
Yeah. Always, and the thing is, I talk a lot about that. Actually, I just did a podcast where someone was asking me about that. I said, emergency services are there to suppress a problem that's gotten out of control. But the real reason why it went out of control in the first place is because we're not taught prevention, right? So if we can we can go into prevention, the emergency services would just be so rare, you know, it would be ultimately like even accidents and things like, right? I mean, if we were really aware and we were really in tune with ourselves, then we would prevent a lot of accidents and mistakes and these kinds of things. But this is the world we're in, right? And we have to work with what we have. And if you're a parent, that like I talk parents down from their fear all the time. You know, I'm just like, just breathe, regulate yourself, you know, because you can't think when you're like that. When you're scared for your child, your brain goes out the window. And so having something ahead of time is really helpful, like just a list of things in your first aid kit or in your dispensary of like how you use it and what you do and what you use. Like homeopathy is really great to get into and have, you know, a bunch of remedies ready to go. Herbal medicine that you can get for all kinds of things. And I actually am writing a course on this exact same thing, like how to actually do all these things so that you're prepared. So then something happens, you're not flying off the handle, and in that you actually can collect yourself and go to your own notes and go, okay, you know, here's what we're going to do now. And then if you go through all those steps, I also teach red flags, right? Of when you got to go to the hospital or when you have to have help, right? What to look for, you know, for those things. What are the real emergencies so that you can triage the situation yourself for the greater or lesser part of it and really prevent a lot of emergencies and more trauma and that kind of stuff. So yeah, there, in a perfect world, right? There's one way, and then here we are. Like the same thing with metabolizing a lot of fat soluble vitamins and even certain foods and things. What's happened is because of all of the generations of shots, we've had a degradation in our encoding. And so we're having now a new era of metabolic problems in our children, and even we're seeing them in adults too, like MTHFR mutations, COMT mutations, all these mutations. And what it means is we can't actually assimilate our vitamins and nutrients properly anymore. So there are some people who can't take certain things because they can't metabolize them. Doesn't mean there's something wrong with the vitamin or nutrient. It's just the fact that those people's guts are either really whacked out from, you know, all these years of antibiotic use, or not even directly, just indirectly eating meats that are tainted with antibiotics and having your gut flora being thrown off and having your terrain, you know, be the incorrect pH. And so now your metabolic system is awry. And like I had a case one time where there was a child who couldn't even digest fruit, couldn't digest phenols at all, couldn't eat fruit. They would go into anaphylaxis, right? So we're getting into other territory of metabolic disarray that means that it's case by case basis, as is holistic medicine when you're treating things. But then that comes down to those nuances that are really important. Um, so then to just sort of pare back, like what happened here with the story and the saga of viruses, right? And I don't think a lot of people understand what happens in the lab, you know, what really is going on with how they come up with these things. And if you did, you would be, you know, you'd be alarmed and horrified. And I can send you a couple of videos that go through it like really, really fine detail, the whole refutation of virology and that it's a pseudoscience. And so what happens here is you have what's called cytopathic effect. When your body is incorrect pH, malnourished, in a chronic inflamed state, poisoned by heavy metals or other microplastics or xenoestrogens, these sorts of things, what happens is you have a lot of inefficient cells that are not functioning optimally or are dead and dying. And when you have anything dead, dying, or damaged, you will have a lot of microbial activity because that's what they do in nature. Microbes will break down things and put them back into their elements to be rebuilt into other things. You'll have parasites, which parasites, again, they're just opportunists. You create a buffet for them, they're going to come on in and eat what you have. And we don't really think about it from a trained perspective as killing stuff. Okay, we think about why are they here? Why are bacteria in our bodies doing this? Well, it's because we have the buffet presented for them and they're just doing their job. And so it's like, did the firemen cause the fire just because they're on the scene of the fire? No, the fire started from other causes and they are just the innocent bystanders that happen to be there around the same time. Correlation doesn't equal causation. So it's the same thing when it comes to germs. So bacteria don't even cause disease. Bacteria come in to clean up messes. And the mess is what is the root cause and what we have to look at. Okay, so when it comes to now the whole idea of the virus understanding, what they did is they take cells, okay, and they put them in petri dishes and they starve them. So they remove their nutrient medium, and they give them things like amphotericin, which is an antibiotic, and they also use monkey kidney cells as the growth medium. And what they're doing here is they're, first of all, introducing all kinds of nucleic acid material, that's DNA, RNA, into the sample. They have to manipulate the sample through starvation to break down the tissues so that they get what they're calling viruses. And they also never follow up with the full spread of Koch's postulates, where they actually remove an article that they're claiming is to be a virus. They do not characterize it, measure it, or any of those things. They do not isolate it, and then they do not put it in a healthy host and create a repeat of a disease of what they claim that thing is doing. That has never actually been done to people's, surprise. So yeah, then there's the Enders papers, right, on measles, which everyone should read, because even in those Enders papers, Enders like, well, we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know if this is the agent that causes measles, because we found another agent in the same sample that also was there that we're calling a virus. But what they're really looking at are extracellular vesicles, artifacts from breakdown of tissue, liposomal extracts that come out of tissues that are broken, right? That's what you're going to see when you actually do have cytopathic effect. And they're not doing proper control studies. So when they're taking out, something from the body or mucus or something and then plating it and killing it and doing all this stuff, they say they have to grow it. They have to actually manufacture it because there's too little of virus in the sample. Well, that's a cop out, because there shouldn't matter how much or little there is. You should still be able to find it, and then you should still be able to then transfer it to a healthy host and make the host sick. None of that is done in any of these experiments. Now, many years ago, Stefan Lanka, measles was his baby, because he was like, there's no measles virus. And he proved it in a court of law that there's no measles virus. And he had to do it in appeals, but he won that case. And so what he did to prove of what virologists are doing is he did the controls. He properly did controls. He said, here's healthy tissue, okay? Totally, completely healthy tissue. We're going to now do exactly what they do to tissue they're saying contains viruses, to healthy tissue. And he was able to manufacture every virus you want to find in a sample. He could manufacture simply by using the same methods that they use: amphotericin, monkey kidney cells, adding in the growth mediums and starvation. He created the DNA replications of measles, HIV, coronavirus, you name it, he could find it in the sample. And he proved that it's the damage to the cells that causes these artifacts. Then they take the artifact material and then they put it in a machine and they try to come up with a DNA strand from it. And from there, it's all computer generated. Everything else from there is all computer stuff. It's not reality. So they'll come up with a new strain or whatever based on a computer modeling program. And then from there, they actually reverse engineer it through the PCR process, so that the PCR processes in the testing, all it's looking for is, are you breaking down tissue into these vesicles? And they're testing for the material of the vesicles and then saying you're positive or negative based on that. So that means the tests themselves are also all fraudulent and do not prove anything. Because, for example, like say you were ill and you went to the doctor and you had a swab. Well, they're like, oh, it looks, they are biased. So they'll say, oh, it looks like you have coronavirus based on your symptoms, so we'll give you a coronavirus test. Okay. But you're breaking down tissues. So of course you're going to most likely, be proven positive for that. And there's also false positives and false negatives and a whole other testing problem there. But, they're most likely going to find it. Same thing with HIV. Oh, you come in, you say, I'm gay, or I have this type of sexual activity, and blah, 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 blah. They're like, oh, okay, and he's not feeling well, or she's not feeling well, we're going to swab them. And then they only swab them for the HIV that they're most likely to find. But if they were to say, have someone coming in ill, and then they just start testing for all these things, Ebola and everything, they're also most likely to find all those would be positive as well, right? Because the similar cytopathic effect is taking place, and really they're just trying to match their reverse testing back to what is going on in your body. And so that whole entire program is pseudoscience, is fraudulent, really. And the more we expose this, the more important that we'll be able to, like in the future, prevent our children from going down this same false road.
Absolutely.
So the whole concept of the virus is manufactured by the virologist. That doesn't exist in nature. Okay, it's not real. We do have phages. Phages are real. Phages have been characterized. Phages have been taken pictures of. Phages have been measured and isolated. Why? Because those are breakdown products of bacteria. So when bacteria are strained or stressed, they can go one of two ways. They can create a phage, which protects its genetic material so that it can come back again because it needs to, because it needs to live, because its job is to do these things for us. Without bacteria, we'd be just piling on each other to infinity. And then or they create like a plaque. They go into dormancy. Okay, and that essentially are the only two routes of bacteria. If it's a fast or slow shock, they'll go in either one of those two directions so they can survive. The other thing that nobody really talks about are the somatids. Okay, the fact that we have pleomorphic lineages inside of our body that come off our red blood cells that are indestructible, that change shape depending on the job or role they're supposed to do in our bodies. So they don't characterize any of these things, they ignore that information, and then they also don't include that when they're trying to understand what's going on with the health of somebody and say, oh, maybe we're actually looking at a somatid here, under the microscope, rather than, oh, this could be a virus, because they're so myopic in the brainwashing and the indoctrination that that's what they're looking at. And once you unravel it, you really have freedom because you understand that you can't catch things like that. The whole idea of contagion gets thrown out of the window because you know that you make your diseases by your activities and your behaviors, and that there's times of purging that may look like that they're happening at the same time as other people. There's now you have to understand there's triggers. There's triggers for purging. There's pheromonal triggers. There's you can have resonance through energy fields. We have an energy field, so you can have sympathetic resonance with someone. Then if you're primed to release something, then you will be triggered into it. But if you're not primed, it doesn't matter if you're around their energy field. You won't be sympathetically resonating with them and you will not have an expression. There are familial traits, like you'll see families getting ill together and have expressions together. And that's advantageous for the tribe to actually go through purges at the same time. And they're resonating their DNA together. There's a different type of trigger going on. So if we were just to dump like the conventional understanding of contagion, which is erroneous, and then really get to the real work, we'd be able to understand when it's the advantageous time to be around each other and when it isn't, right? For real. When we're already sick and ready to burst and ready to express, and when it's different times of year, and when we know how to nourish ourselves and prevent it in the first place would be ideal. But to understand that we have these other mechanisms that are backup mechanisms in place that get triggered by all of these different things, and it has nothing to do with a particle that's transferred from like one person to the other person. It's not random, and it's not like you have to wear a mask anywhere because you're going to be on the subway and that's going to happen to you. That's not how it works. And so I look forward to a future where we really get to the nitty gritty of this real science and really help people through the terrain understanding of their bodies and how to nourish themselves, how to cleanse ahead of time. Like I always say to people, oh, it's spring's coming. I hope you're doing your coffee enemas. I hope you're already shifting your diet and working to prevent an expression that is going to be uncomfortable for you. Because I don't get things like that. My family doesn't get sick like this. There's not going to be ever, my daughter's never going to get measles. No, because she actually does coffee enemas. She's 12. She does coffee enemas with me. Sometimes we do them, because she understands it. I've taught her that from when she was a baby, and she understands that she needs to not poison herself with foods. And when she does, if she goes behind my back and eats something she shouldn't, what happens? She gets congested. Like right away, she gets congested. I said, "Oh, what'd you eat?" She's like, "Oh yeah, and I shouldn't eat that chocolate bar, or whatever." I said, "Yeah, but your body's so brilliant; it's telling you right away that you did that." And it wants to clean up now, immediately. So Yeah. So anyway, if there's more questions about it, but that's really the nuts and bolts of the fact there isn't actually measles virus at all in
No.
existence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest one for people to recognize. Like, there's not some like outside, invader that's going to get us all sick. And I think having the tools in place that, there's the biggest thing with, well, what if my child gets it, or how do I prevent them from getting it? It's like, well, healthy lifestyle, real food, being outside in nature, like just all health doesn't have to be so complicated, doing the things you're doing. I know there's a lot more you could add to that, but just keeping it very simple, removing the toxins, the junk food, preservatives, and just I always say just real food touched by the sun. Can God recognize it as food? Movement, making sure there's like low stress, and just yes, lots of time outside in nature for sure. And then for me, I don't know, and maybe Amanda, you have a different perspective on this from some of the things that I've read, that it also can be a rite of passage in childhood that is an upgrade to their DNA, and like a leveling up that helps prevent asthma or different cancers or other things in their system. So even going through a bout of measles or chickenpox or things like this is actually kind of an upgrade, preparing them into adulthood. And I don't know if you have those same understandings or not, but that's what I tell parents too, that it also prepares them in later on life, and that when given the right tools, your child will be okay. It'll be uncomfortable, but most cases with a nutrient, good food, supported with vitamin A. I don't want to give like absolutes, but I just think it's gone so out of control with the fear propaganda, that, oh my gosh, people die and people have, end up with brain dead or blind or deaf. But this fear messaging was never there until there was something to profit off of.
Mm-hmm.
And if we go before the 1950s, I love the Brady Bunch clip going around, and even though there's Fred Flintstone or the Flintstones and a whole bunch of other ones, it was talked about as such a benign thing that happened
Mm-hmm.
until now. There's things to profit from. So I don't know if you think that or not about rite of passage, but there was
Yeah.
one, if you want to touch on that, and just I don't want to forget, because there's another question that this is perfect for you, is why aren't naturopaths known about train? So there's two things for you there to touch on.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, so childhood exanthems, okay? We have childhood exanthems. And what happens is and again, it still is from poor feeding, not enough sunlight, like it's still a lifestyle factor aspect. Maybe they're not breastfed properly, maybe they had a hard birth, maybe they were still vaccinated once, and or had the vitamin K shot, which is totally unnecessary, like all of those things. So you have to look at the history. Ultimately, our children shouldn't get anything. Okay, you shouldn't see anything. In a perfect world, there's no disease. But when we see expressions like that in childhood, it's because it's preparing the body for growth. So this is why usually you'll see like a fever or a rash, or even like there's different like chicken pox or any of these things that we associate with childhood illness. That and they change over time, by the way, because it depends on the culture and what they're being fed, and the lifestyle factors involved and the environment. But ultimately, that's preparing the body for a rapid growth. And you will see that after they go through their languishing, they will have a growth afterwards, a growth spurt. So that's quite extraordinary. And it's because a lot of those proteinaceous wastes need to leave the body. And they have to get out one way or another. And if they won't get out through the breath, through the stool, and then they have to get out through the skin. So you'll see them as a rash, and the fever mechanism will click in because that has to make things move faster. Because now, okay, we got a bunch of stuff coming out at once. Emergency, let's go. Let's get it hotter. Let's get our white blood cells involved. Let's get our macrophages eating it up. Let's get going, right? And the child has to be laying down and not eating and like in rest for that really fast action to take place properly. Really, the main thing is to keep them hydrated and keep them well rested. If there's fever, you can do skin on skin. That really helps regulate them, because I know it's really scary to see them go through a hot fever and their breath rate and heart rate going up. But you can use homeopathic ferrum phos. I found that really helpful to just not suppress the fever, but just like help it not spike too crazily. And by the way, fevers usually only will ever spike when there's a hypothalamic damage from the shots. You don't usually see spiking fevers in unvaccinated children. So just keep them regulated, keep them hydrated. If it goes over 105 degrees Fahrenheit, that's usually my cutoff for comfort. I just say give them a cool, not cold, cool water enema. It'll kind of just temper it a little bit more and help them through it. But not to panic, obviously, but just help them regulate, be with them through their expression, and then he'll get a growth. So yeah, absolutely. There's childhood exanthems. There's roseola infantum. I mean, there's no vaccine for roseola infantum, like right? But almost every child gets roseola infantum in some manner, right? They just forgot about that one. That one, they just like left that one off the table, right? And people also forget that when the measles vaccine was first developed, the measles prevalence had dropped away significantly. It was already fading because they had figured out how to not pollute themselves and how to eat properly. And there were already like sanitation going on there and information and education of the population. You didn't need a shot at all. And so they come in with the heroic shots, always when the disease rates were right at the bottom of the pile, already figured out, right? Yeah, same thing with scarlet fever. There's no shot for scarlet fever. I mean, these are just expressions of waste that must come out, and there's different mechanisms of the body to do it, but they're all in the same category of like fever, mucus, lung stuff. You'll see the similar types of things because those are the mechanisms the body uses to, release. The naturopathic aspect, it was really hard for me to go through school realizing that there was an attack on holistic medicine, and naturopathic medicine was really targeted. I was kind of a whistleblower right out of the gate my first year. I got blacklisted, and a lot of teachers didn't like me. Definitely the board didn't like me at all because I was like, why did you remove iridology? Why do you keep promoting that viruses exist when they don't? Why do you keep going like handshaking with Health Canada, who's like in line? Basically, they're an arm of the pharmaceutical cartel. They do not care about our health. Why are you cooperating with them? Why aren't you standing up to them? I was very vocal about that. And so they really have done it now. Like that was like 13, 14 years ago when I graduated. It's done now. Like the dogma has stuck, and most naturopaths are not most, but like the majority that are out there are more like green allopaths. They just, they don't treat holistically. They just use, supplements to do the same things that what a drug would do. So it's like a soft drug instead, like using a supplement instead of a drug. Same idea for suppressing, like suppression still a goal, like not, it's a better alternative, but you have to be really careful who the practitioner is. If they took the shot, yeah, you don't want them.
That was even I went back to school. I went to the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition, and in 2020 I got a cease and desist from them that I was not allowed to say that I studied there, graduated from there, or use the RHN title. I could no longer say I was a registered holistic nutritionist for literally teaching and speaking on the things they taught me in school, but they just didn't want to rock the boat with allopathic conventional system, Health Canada, all these things that I was like you're just bought too. Do you not stand for anything? Like what's the purpose here? What are you really teaching? So I thought that was quite funny to receive a cease and desist from them. I was like, well, this doesn't really mean anything. It's just humorous.
Oh yeah, I wasn't even allowed to put in my book that I graduated from the college. I wasn't even allowed to like mention it in my own published book. That they're so nuts.
Like, that part of your life just, didn't exist. Like, they don't want that association. Like, I just think it's so crazy.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We're seeing a lot of corruption. We're seeing a lot of darkness, that's really descended. Because it's like going to eat itself. It's a lie, and so truth always comes to the forefront in time. Just give it enough time. And so Absolutely. This is really they're toiling, and they're going to destroy themselves by their own corruption. And we just have to step back and take our children away as much as we can from it and teach them well, and try to keep the devices out of their minds, and and all the propaganda that's coming at them. And that's why, I support homeschooling and or unschooling or travel schooling or whatever, but don't hand your children over to these agencies, because unfortunately it's corrupt through and through. And this is what we're dealing with here. And we're dealing with a really big industry. I mean, this is like $1 trillion industry, the pharmaceutical industry, and they don't want to lose $1. I mean, just in the story alone, when you look about dimethyl sulfoxide, the history of it, how the FDA tried to destroy that as well, right? Everything that works and that's effective and that threatens their $1 trillion industry, they want to destroy it. They're greedy. They don't want to share, and that's what we're up against. But ultimately, we have to just stand strong and speak the truth, and protect our children as much as we can from all of the tyranny that's going on, and just do the best we can do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm.
I feel like there's so much that, to talk about, and I just love having conversations with you. Just always a wealth of knowledge, and I always learn so much that I was like, oh, should do this again. But I know that just like for the sake of this video was just to remove the fear around the measles, knowing that, there's not a virus out there. There is no contagion. I love diving into German new medicine. That's a whole other avenue. That's where I like to land too. It's a whole fascinating area. And again, wherever you kind of find the terrain theory, whatever it is dive into the contagion myth. There's a book, Dr. Thomas Cowan talks about it, called The Contagion Myth. What Really Makes You Ill is another book by David Parker and Don Lewis. It's like
Lester.
this thick. The Lester, thank you. Yeah, it's like 800 pages. Took them 8 years to write it. Amazing book. Goodbye Germ Theory is excellent, especially regarding with childhood vaccinations. And Dr. Thomas Cowan, his book on childhood illnesses, autoimmune, and vaccinations is great as well. So I can give out some of those resources. And then, of course, Amanda. Amanda just is full of information. She has her courses, programs. I think it sounds like you're creating something else right now. Is that what you kind of alluded to?
Yeah. Yeah, well, currently, I'm going to Confluence in Music and Sky. Confluence is in Texas, Music and Sky is in California. And so I'm giving talks on DMSO there, and also how to cleanse, like proper cleansing. And once I pull together that particular presentation, I'll be formulating that into a course, all the different ways of cleansing and purging and cleaning the terrain. And right now I have an important one on how to get metals out of the body. So I do have a course on how to cleanse metals. And where metals follow, so do parasites. So people who are having parasite issues, also that's part of the course. And I do have like an initial course that just helps people get clear about their health goals. It's a reflective course where they just go through like their needs, wants, like all of these things, because I really find that people, they don't know where to start, especially
Yeah.
once they've come out of the conventional thinking. They're like, okay, now what do I do? I'm not going to go to the doctor. I don't want to go to the hospital as much as I possibly, can. What do I do? How do I start? Where do I begin? And so I did this self-assessment course to help people just focus on what they need, what their family needs are, and then how to go forward and do step by step, like throughout. I have all kinds of different courses. I have like a dog cancer protocol. I have a lung protocol course. I have all kinds of stuff. And what the goal is to teach you the different remedies, how to actually heal it in your own body. But then once you have that knowledge, you have it. Like, now what to do going forward when anything happens with your lungs, right? Because you can you can access the information anytime, because once you have it forever. But also the whole point is to teach you so that you can think it through and know how to apply remedies properly, which there are so many. I mean, there's ridiculous amounts of remedies that you can use that work for you. One family, they might like a certain set of remedies, and another family might like another. And what I always teach is to go learn what's growing in your backyard, learn what's growing around you. I mean, dandelions are coming up, mulleins coming up. Like when the snow finally goes, we're going to have medicine growing in our backyards. I mean, we already have it in our pine trees and everything, but like, learn what's around you and be empowered to collect your own medicine from your own backyards, and understand how to use it for your family's health, and really focus most on cleansing and protection. And then you don't have to go through as much of the drama and the trauma and the upset that we see so much of right now, for especially for the people who ate the propaganda and took the shots, you know.
I just I created a course actually called Your Edible Backyard. It's newish. So
Nice.
because there's like so much in like growing around you weeds, and people are pulling out so much medicine and tossing it out under the thinking that it's a weed. But so I just got that out last month, and it's called Your Edible Backyard. So if anybody is interested, it's there because it's so fun once you realize what plants are growing just at your doorstep. It's incredibly liberating to know it's right there.
Yeah.
I realized as you were talking, I don't know if it was stirred up from one of the questions, but there's something that I haven't been able to figure out yet. And I don't know if I haven't dove down the right areas, but with the vaccines and the no virus, that no viruses exist, what are they saying is a live virus vaccine versus a dead virus? Like, what is the live? Like, what I don't
Yeah.
really understand that. And the live, is it actually shedding? And that's what's, most people with the measles are because they got this shot, which I think is just detoxing the pollutants out of them. But what is the live versus the dead?
Yeah, it's basically just more of the material. So the live is just like the whole form of it, whereas the non-alive is just a part of it. That's really the only difference, is like how much of what they said they've isolated. So they do the cytopathic effect. They get the vesicle that they've decided is the agent that they're looking for, and they will either put that in whole, that's a live virus, or they will fractionate that and put pieces, and then that's your regular or whatever style virus. That's it. That's the only difference. And then the shedding or the volatility. So the more that of that whole exosome or piece of that cell is in the body, the more inflamed you'll be, because you'll react more intensely to that because it's not supposed to be in your body. Okay, it's confusion to the body, and the body will start to create inflammation and will try to like figure out what's going on. The mechanism's now been confused, and the body's trying to make corrections, and the corrections might be all over the place, depending on you, depending on your terrain health and all these other factors and previous vaccines, how much metals you have in your body, is your liver congested from bad diet, all those factors are involved. The shedding aspect is really interesting, especially with what they've done to this particular shot, which I think the goal was to create it. So they have a type of vaccine for deer. I remember looking this up way before this whole hoax came. And it freaked me out because it was a vaccine, they called it a vaccine, that they gave to the female deer to stop them from producing so many babies, okay? Because they were trying to actually control herd population through vaccination. You can go look this up. You can go deer population herd control through vaccination, or fertility control through vaccination. And so they would then get only maybe one baby out of that particular female. But what they said is as they were doing it, they would be able to inoculate other females just by proximity of what they had given them, which tells me that they're messing around with our rhythms, our diurnal system, in our pheromones. And so I started to research pheromones at that point to try to, because as you know, women cycle together when they are around each other, right? Or we also give out other pheromones to like attract the opposite sex, and these sorts of things, these scent molecules come off of us. And so it was doing something to affect the scent molecules so that it would send a signal to the other females to not be fertile. So it would affect their ovulation cycles. And I was concerned about this particular shot, that they're population controlists. They think that there's too many of us, which is another scam. And they want less of us. Now they have robotics and all that, they don't want as many of us. So I was concerned just by proximity to those who accepted this particular shot, there would be problems. And that's what we saw. We saw miscarriages. We obviously saw a real inflammation problem with blood, where blood was clotting incorrectly. So whatever communication was going on there was causing clotting problems, causing issues with the blood itself. And I'm sure the main goal of that was to create problems of the menstrual blood, so that the body would want to purge and make sure that you weren't fertile. So there's a goal there for sure. to have an anti-fertility aspect, which was very nerve-wracking for me with, having a daughter who wants to have like 10 children in her life and I'm like trying to keep them her away from grandparents when they get fresh shots and stuff. But as it was, she was around her grandfather who got at the first shot, and she got her period really early, way before I did. She wasn't even 10. So right at the beginning of the whole hoax, she wasn't even 10 and she got her first period just by being around the freshly vaccinated. So I knew that the pheromones were affecting her. And so it can be explained through pheromone signaling very easily, and confusion, or like just telling the body to release the blood from the womb, from the uterus. So definitely that's shedding. So it's not like virus is coming off of you and then like somebody else picking it up and then they're getting it sick. It's the signaling problem. It's the communications and the cycles that we have with each other, and the way that we have subtle communication through our sweat, through our energy fields, these sorts of things, that are causing, all of these problems in communication and triggering other people who haven't even had the shots at all.
Yeah, hearing it like that makes so much sense. Yeah, because it was the shedding. I put it on the back burner a little bit, especially with the recent one, because I didn't want to add another fear or division what was going on, because I knew people, around us, and I didn't want my kids to be like scared of this person, because I was like, that's all they want to do is like separate and create fear. So it totally makes sense with the pheromones. Sorry, the birds at this time every day they get
That's
loud. I should
awesome.
probably go back. Yeah, it's actually fascinating. Again, nature. There's answers and everything, and talking about being connected to our cycles and the rhythms and the earth and the birds. Every morning, 5 a.m. Every evening, it's getting close. They get louder soon. 5 p.m. every day. 5 a.m. 5 p.m. You know exactly what
That's
time
their
it is.
cycle. They
Yeah.
see their cycle. They know that certain UV light is hitting the right way. They're like, it's time to talk, it's time to gather, it's time to feed. And we've lost that connection to our own cycles. I mean, I even think that chickenpox parties were on purpose, not to like catch the virus or whatever, but that so your kids would purge together and everyone would bond and everyone would go through things that, at the same time, to prepare for what was coming, where you had to be strong and vigorous to do the farm work and to play or to have leisure time and the things that we used to have, but the natural world understands cycles perfectly. I mean, if everyone was like, oh my gosh, what happened in the autumn and all the trees are starting to turn color, it must be a virus. All the tree leaves are turning different colors and red and stuff, and now they're all falling off. Oh my goodness, you know what I mean? That would be like propaganda, like the same kind of explanation that we were told about like viruses, right? It's like, no, they have their cycle that they have to go through to be strong, and that means they have to purge their leaves in order to do that. And they have to go back into the soil, and then they make sap again, and then they grow again. And like, this is nature's cycles, and we are nature. We are part of nature. We have to remember who we are and what our cycles look like, and prepare when it comes change of seasons, so that we're strong and we understand what's coming and how to manage it.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's in our women's cycle, right? Like being connected to that, like we have like, the different seasons, throughout a whole month, and how we should be connected to the moon and why it was called the moon, and just, how they just wanted to disconnect us at every aspect, disconnect us from nature, disconnect us from God, because we are just so incredible. Yeah, I just think our human body and what we can do is so fascinating. I remember reading Braided Sweetgrass, and there was this section talking about the nut trees and a 3-year cycle. And it's like, yeah, we always panic at these different stages, but they're also necessary. It's like the one stage, it's proliferated in nuts. So the nuts like fall down, then all of a sudden there's enough nuts for the squirrels to eat a whole bunch, and the rest for new nut trees to grow. Then the squirrels, because they had so much food, they grow in abundance. So the next season, with these new squirrels, then the other predators can eat these squirrels, and then again more nuts, and then because the following year less nuts, and then the next year less nuts, until the third season again you'll see more of these nuts dropping to the ground. Because if there was nuts all the time, there'd be squirrels eating them all the time, too many squirrels, not enough predators, and it just, the ecosystem would, wreak havoc. And then more squirrels, not enough predators to eat them, meaning, anyways, I'm getting it all wrong. I'm distracted by birds, but basically 3-year cycle, it's super important. And we panic with these different phases, like, oh, why aren't there nuts this year? Or why there's like too many of this? We need to intervene. That's what it is. We always think we need to intervene and fix things when our bodies and nature is doing exactly what it knows what to do, and just trusting these stages and different phases of life or healing or what it might be creating is, I don't know, I think it's so beautiful. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that could even explain what we're calling pandemics too, that there's smaller cycles where there's purging and healing and this sort of, and then there's bigger cycles where we're all connected at that particular time, or there's bigger cataclysms that affect us all at the same time, whereas there's microclimate ones that affect just certain regions and certain areas, right? Like, do we even question when, because another book for people to read was Arthur Firstenberg's book, The Invisible Rainbow, right? Where he talks about every time that they upgraded the signaling, so our electromagnetic frequencies, when they shifted, a lot of people got respiratory illnesses, right? And because we have to adapt to this electrical world that we live in, which we have ether. And when we changed, like say from 4G to 5G, all of a sudden, like remember when we were all locked down and they were going out sneaking and putting up 5G towers all over the place, right? Now, what is that going to do to our health? How many people can adapt to the change of electromagnetic frequencies? How well are they able to adapt? Is their nutrition primed and ready for that adaptation? Because you have to make enzymes to adapt to new things. And that means your digestive health, your liver health, all has to be, in sound mind or in a sound way to actually adapt properly. And did anybody question, maybe it's the EMFs that are causing a lot of people to get sick. It has nothing to do with the virus at all. And so we have all these bigger picture things that we have to bring into the disease story when we're trying to diagnose or make a decision about why someone is unhealthy or not. And what's interesting is it always comes down to the same thing. It's not enough nutrition and too much toxic waste inside the body. And that means for any condition, I've seen questions like coming up, like actually tinnitus, someone just said tinnitus. Next week, I'm launching my tinnitus protocol. Okay. It talks about how to heal it, all the different ways of healing it, right? It's like, but it comes down to similar things where you have to support the terrain nutrition. You have to fix the gut so it's assimilating properly, because you can put nutrition in, but if it can't be used, then it goes out, right? And you have to look at where all the poisons, toxins, and assaults are coming in. And that's like back to German new medicine too. It could be an emotional assault, right? It could be where you're at with your stress levels and old traumas that you're carrying in your body. They all can predispose you to these weaknesses that now knock you down every couple times a year, or every change of seasons, or when there's a new upgrade, you can't adapt well, you're not vital enough. And so it's like their methods are death by 1,000 cuts, right? They got you coming and going. And then they insult you doubly with their own medicine, which is suppressing the action of the body that wants to fix this, that wants to get it out and wants to make corrections and is naturally intelligent and knows what you need. And if we just tuned into nature, tuned into our nature and our bodies, we would learn and we would understand what we need, and we wouldn't pollute ourselves the way we do with all the offerings of the pharmaceutical, cartel. We would just say, no, thank you. I have God, I have nature, we're good. And we would be better for it. But we're obviously, we're learning the hard way. We are learning, I hope. And we will, eventually come through it. I have an optimistic, outcome in my mind that we will figure it out and we will overcome the tyranny of it all.
Yes, absolutely, we will. That's the cycle. We will. It just takes longer than we want, but already there's this huge shift of people wanting to feel more empowered, learning their options, I'm sure you've seen it in your practice. I'm sure there's more and more people coming to you for different things, wanting to feel how they can be more responsible for their own health, things they can do at home. And I'm seeing a huge shift, even, including the birth world everywhere. So I think there's monumental changes coming and happening and becoming more self-sufficient. So you opened up, there they go. You opened up a lot of questions or people asking about where they can find your course. And I actually never knew it was pronounced tinnitus. I always pronounced it tinnitus. So
Potato, I think, for that
yeah.
one. Yeah.
Okay, so yummy.doctor for everyone that's curious about Amanda's programs, the tinnitus course coming up. I'm going to say it back and forth now, which way. Um, yeah, and all her other amazing products that she has and DMSO. Just again, obviously, you've made a wealth of knowledge. I always love having you come on here and chatting. And hopefully, that one was just specific to measles, but there was a ton of comments for very specific conditions or things people are going through. So reach out to Amanda at yummy.doctor for the specific questions people have. And yeah, and then I'm just going to do a little plug just because it starts soon. So I created a course called Warrior Mamas that starts April 2nd. I'm looking to take 10 mamas in. We're halfway there. So I think there's 5 more spots full. It takes you through 4 different levels of warrior. Level 1 is just reminding you that you are a warrior. You have everything that you need within you and setting the intention for the course. Level 2 is the physical body, looking at just the physical needs, whether it's mind, emotional, mental support, and how to strengthen ourselves as the warrior. Level 3 is what we're talking about, the trusting the body, knowing that we're nature, having the confidence in how we heal, contagion myth. And then level 4 is reclaiming it all and how to put on the armor and stand steadfast in your convictions moving forward in this crazy world. So if anyone's interested, starts April 2nd. Just comment warrior. Hope that's okay to put that out there. I'm just excited about it.
That's awesome. That's great. That's what we need. More of that.
Yes. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll have to do this again.
Sounds great. Great. Yeah. Yeah. If there's any questions or anything, my staff, my team is really great. They handle all kinds of stuff. I don't actually do one-on-one consults anymore because I'm focusing on teaching people how to doctor themselves through the courses and stuff. So I just saw a question asking if I do consults. So I've sort of retired from that, but I do take emergency cases. But yeah, the eventually we're all going to be coaches. We're all going to be able to coach each other. We're all going to stand in our power as we learn this. And so thank you for what you do, Kristen. And yeah, this was great to be here. And yeah, we'll do it again sometime on whatever else pops up that we have to put a fire out for.
The next thing, 'cause it's never ending. That's why once you realize the contagion myth, then the never ending cycles won't bother you. And before I forget, because people have asked, my kids gave me stamps before this call and I forgot about them. And I like having this hand up here and now it's all over this arm too. So I had some dinosaur stamps on me talking about, yeah, how we're both moms. But yeah, I appreciate everyone coming on. It was weird just staring at myself, but it was nice to hear your voice,
Yeah.
Amanda. I look forward to when I put this, the live up to actually see you on here. And yeah, talk soon. Thank you,
Okay.
everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thanks again. Thanks. Bye.